Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of On The Sidelines. My name is Matthew Lee Bruni,
And I'm Benedict Rhodes.
and today we're going to be doing our predictions for the NBA resuming their season from starting from the regular season going into the playoffs.
In this video, we're going to look at teams to look out for in each conference, um, as well as who we think is going to win the Larry O'Brien Trophy coming into the season, and sort of look at some of the key figures in each conference. Matthew, before we do that, do you want to sort of run us through the format and the NBA play-in tournament for the playoffs?
Yeah, definitely. So the season, of course, resuming on July 30th, is going to be starting with the regular season. Each team is going to play 8 games. Of course, there's going to be 22 teams as well, so there's going to be a couple of teams lower than the eighth seed fighting for that spot. And so, in that regard, after the 8 regular season games, if a team that's below the eighth seed is within 4 games, there's going to be a play-in tournament for that position. So that's going to be something exciting to see if that actually happens. But yeah, just in that sense, that's going to happen, and then we're going to go into a regular playoffs, best of 7 each round.
And as I mentioned, we're going to look at a couple of teams in each conference. Who's your first Eastern Conference team to look out for?
Yeah, so the first Eastern Conference team that I'm looking at is the Boston Celtics. Of course, going into the resumption of the season, they're in the third spot. They're just a couple of games, 3 games behind the Toronto Raptors for the second spot in the East. Um, I think I think it will be interesting to see how they fare against well, in the Eastern Conference, like especially going into the playoffs against some tougher teams. Of course, they do have some great players on their squad, like Kemba Walker, Jason Tatum, who's been a young star for them so far, and Jaylen Brown as well. But I think I think just in general, it's going to be interesting to see, like I said, how they'll fare against teams like the Milwaukee Bucks, the Toronto Raptors, and even a couple of teams behind them, like Miami or Indiana, or even Philly too. Um, but yeah, that's my first team. Who's your first team to look out for?
Yeah, I've gone for last year's NBA championship winner. Sorry, the Toronto Raptors. They have a 46-18 record, and I think one of the best defensive teams in the league. The saying is defense wins championships, of course. And the Raptors are actually better defensively than they were last season when they won the championship. So I think the only chance the Raptors are gonna, or any other Eastern Conference team, but especially the Raptors, are gonna have winning the Eastern Conference and ultimately the NBA championship is by stopping teams like the Bucks or the Celtics with these explosive offenses, and the Raptors are going to have to be at their best. And if they are, I think they'll the defense especially will probably at least put them in a good position to win the East and maybe even reach their second consecutive NBA final.
Yeah. So moving on, the second team that I'm looking out for is the Milwaukee Bucks. Of course, now they're pretty much locked to get the first seed in the East, so it'll probably be a sweep in the first round against whoever, and then they'll probably have a tougher matchup against a team like the Heat, Celtics, depending on how it forms in the end of the regular season. But just in general, like it'll be interesting to see how they come back from a disappointing playoffs last year. Of course, they were up 2-0 against the Raptors in the East Final, and then of course they lost 4 straight against them. So I think coming into this year it'll be something to see, like how they'll fare in the playoffs, and as I mentioned, against some great teams that in the Eastern Conference. Of course, they have Giannis on their team who can probably lead them to an NBA Finals. But yeah, I think in a situation where it's like a neutral site, no home court advantage, I think it will probably be tough for the Bucks to make the NBA Finals this year. Um, yeah, what's your second East team, Ben?
I've gone with the Miami Heat. I played around with a few different options here, but I think the Heat are a bit unpredictable, which I think is maybe to their advantage, but also, of course, could be to their disadvantage. They added Andre Iguodala at the trade deadline, but since then went 7-7, um, losing to some very bad teams as well. Atlanta, Cleveland, Minnesota, and Charlotte among them. So I don't know. I think the Heat will have to be on top form to beat teams that we've already mentioned: Celtics, Bucks, Raptors, etc. But I think the Heat have a chance to, if they can get onto the hot form we've seen at points during the season. I think they could be a dangerous team, and even if not win uh, some playoff rounds or whatever, I think they could at least cause some damage and at least push teams a bit further.
Okay, sounds good. Now moving to the Western Conference, who's your first team to look for in the West?
Uh, yeah, I've gone with who I think is probably the best team on paper in the LA Clippers. Uh, I just think they are maybe the most complete team in the league. They have Kawhi Leonard, of course, who's probably the best player in the NBA when he's, or close to it, at least when he's on his top form. Led the Raptors to a championship last year, of course. Paul George is very good. Lou Williams. Um, they just score a ton of 3-pointers, and they just score a ton of points generally. And I think other than the Lakers, I think or maybe the Bucks or Raptors, I think it's gonna be very hard for any other team in the playoffs to stop the Clippers. And I think if they get on a hot streak, I think they're gonna just plow right through this this NBA playoffs. Um, and defensively as well, they're good. I think again, it's the offense that's gonna probably push them all the way through. What about you? Who's your first Western Conference team?
The first team I'm looking for, the other LA team, as you mentioned before, the Lakers. Of course, we know that they're undoubtedly one of the best teams in the league. Of course, up there with the Clippers and Bucks. Um, and of course, leading them LeBron James, Anthony Davis, who probably can take them to the NBA Finals. Um, I think I think it'll be interesting to see coming from a player like LeBron, who's in his like 17th or something season now. It will be interesting to see how much rest he's had, how he fares out in the playoffs against a team like the Clippers, as you mentioned, and a couple other Western Conference teams that can make some noise in the playoffs. Um, I think I think one of their injuries, I think it was a couple or last week, their player Rajon Rondo was going to be out for 6 to 8 weeks. That might be concerning for them. Um, I'm not like, besides LeBron and Anthony Davis, I don't know how a player like JaVale McGee or Dwight Howard are gonna fare in the playoffs. So I think it will be, like I said, I think it'll be interesting to see how they do. And who's your second West team?
My second West team, kind of the same or similar, at least to my Miami Heat pick. I've gone with a team who are kind of unpredictable at times. Shall I say I've gone with the Houston Rockets. They have one of the best players, of course, in James Harden, and of course they have Russell Westbrook as well. So offensively, they're a very very good team. Up there, I think, with the Clippers and the Lakers, and some of the teams in the East. But they don't have a center. They're playing without a center, which I think is kind of a strange thing. Nothing we've ever really seen, for at least not I've ever seen in the NBA. So that'll be interesting to see how that works. I mean, they were 11-6 playing without a center before the season was ended or postponed. Um, yeah, like the Houston Rockets again, they're gonna score a lot of points, but defensively, I think is the worry for me. But yeah, if they're scoring well over 100 points a game, sometimes I think they could cause a lot of damage. And similar to what I said about the Clippers, like they're gonna score a ton of points, and that could be enough to just push them all the way through. But I don't think, to be honest, that they're gonna really beat a team like the Lakers or the Clippers. But well, again, this is gonna be a sprint to the finish, and we're just gonna have to wait and see. What about you? Who's your second Western team?
So my second team that I'm going with in the West is the Denver Nuggets. I think that they're one of the more underrated teams in the league, and I don't think they get recognized as much as because they are pretty successful. They are third currently in the West. And also to mention that they are 1.5 games back of the second seed, the Clippers. So maybe if they move up, they might make some noise in the playoffs. But yeah, like I mentioned, they're definitely an underrated team. They have some great players on their squad, like Jamal Murray, and of course their center Nikola Jokic. Um, I don't think like the Rockets. I don't think that they're going to make the finals, but I think that they can make some noise in the playoffs and perhaps like maybe make the West finals. Perhaps like if they fare well against an LA team or something like that. But yeah, that's my second team that I'm looking out for.
And if you had to pick, well, I guess we'll now narrow that down. If you had to pick one team to come out of, we'll start with the Eastern Conference. Who would you pick?
Well, I'm gonna go with the Bucks. I think it will be. I think the Bucks have had that energy from last year. Of course, their disappointing season, as I mentioned, getting out of the or being kicked out, not kicked out, sorry, being eliminated in the playoffs in the East Final. How disappointing they looked against the Raptors. I think this year they might have that different energy, might actually make it far. So for that reason, and hopefully maybe that their team has improved more from this 4 month hiatus. But yeah, I think the Bucks will in the end win, but I think the team that team can go pretty far. And yeah, I think I'm gonna pick them to win the East this year. But how
Uh,
about you? Who's your Eastern team?
yeah, I've gone with the reigning NBA champion Toronto Raptors. Um, I think coming into the season, a lot of the talk was the Raptors have lost Kawhi Leonard. The Raptors aren't going to repeat as champions, and I think a lot of Raptors players were sort of fueled by that. There's also been doubts like is Kyle Lowry good enough to be the point guard on a team that wants to win the NBA championship? And I think over the course of the season, he's proven people wrong. Uh, Pascal Siakam and Fred VanVleet as well, of course, among a very good team. Uh, Defensively, the Raptors are good. Offensively, the Raptors are good. Um, and I think the sort of desire to repeat as champions after what happened last year, I think might help them sort of push them over the edge and really take a team like take the Bucks to maybe even 7 games if they were to come against each other, or at least a very exciting series. So I'll go with the Toronto Raptors.
Okay, and who is your Western Conference team to come out? Well, to come out of the conference.
My Western Conference team is the LA Clippers. As I said earlier, I think they're the best team on paper. They don't really have any major holes in their lineup. Uh, Reigning Finals MVP Kawhi Leonard, of course, is one of the best players in the world. With a few months off as well, he and the rest of the team, was the same for every team, I guess, had a chance to sort of refresh, get 100% healthy, and prepare for this final stretch of the season. And I think healthy and on form Kawhi Leonard is a very scary thought for other teams. And yeah, I think the LA Clippers are going to be the ones to come out of the Western Conference. What about you?
Yeah, I'm going with the same team, the Clippers as well. Um, I think, yeah, as you mentioned, Kawhi Leonard, reigning Finals MVP, will definitely will definitely play well in the playoffs, especially with his other leader, I guess, Paul George. Um, I think I don't think they've played too much in the season, both teams or both players. Like they've just played individually most of the season, but it'll be great to see. Like it'll be interesting to see how they fare again when they're both playing together on the same team in the playoffs. Because like I mentioned, that they haven't played as much because of injuries and other stuff. But yeah, and they also have some players like Patrick Beverly, Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell that could probably help them out in their chance to win the finals this year. But yeah, in the end, I'm gonna pick the Clippers to win the West.
And You mentioned the Clippers are going to win the West, but who do you think is going to win the overall NBA championship this season?
I think this year the Bucks are going to win it. As I mentioned, it's going to be tough for them to actually get out of the East because you mentioned the Raptors would come out of the East, so I think it's going to be tougher for them this year than last year to get out of the Eastern Conference. But as I mentioned, that they'll end up coming out of it and end up winning the championship, which is my prediction. If they do end up playing against the Clippers, it will be I think that will be a great NBA Finals to watch. But yeah, I think that with Giannis, like I mentioned, coming out with that energy of a disappointing season last year, and a couple other players too, like Chris Middleton, Eric Bledsoe too, not really performing well in last year's playoffs. I think it will be. I think that they'll end up with that energy winning the championship this year.
Um, yeah, I'm going to go with the LA Clippers. Again, not really surprising, considering all the praise I've sort of placed on them this year. I think if they stay healthy and play to their ability, I think they're capable of taking down any team, and I wouldn't all be surprised to see them lifting that trophy and Kawhi Leonard maybe even getting his third Finals MVP potentially. Um, as we kind of mentioned, I think off the top, the season starts this week. Sorry, Thursday, July 30th. Starts off with the Utah Jazz and the New Orleans Pelicans at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. Later that day, though, two of the teams we mentioned at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. The LA Clippers and the LA Lakers will be taking on each other in one of the first games of this return to the season. Matthew, what do you think of that matchup, um, and how much you're looking forward to that?
Yeah, well, I think the Clippers Lakers matchup is going to be entertaining as all the other matchups this past season, or this same season, I should say. But yeah, it will be. It's going to be a great opening night too, especially watching the Pelicans, who a lot of people think are going to end up making the playoffs. We'll see that if that happens. But yeah, I think it's going to be a great way to kick off the season.
And a couple of days later, on Saturday, August 1st, the Toronto Raptors return to action, 8:30 p.m. against the LA Lakers, who we just talked about. Um, how do you like the Raptors' chances, and what do you make of their start to the season?
Well, they already beat them this year, so I think that they have a great chance to win again against them. But I did want to mention, like, just in general with their schedule, they do have some tough matchups besides the Lakers. Because they still have the Celtics, the Bucks,
The Heat.
I guess the Sixers and the Nuggets too. So they do still have a couple of tough matchups. But when we look at the very first game for the Raptors, I think that'll be a close one against the Lakers. What about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I think the Raptors, as you mentioned, they could take it to the Lakers. I think um, they'll also have one eye on Monday against the Miami Heat. That could be a pretty good big game for both teams. But again, I think the Raptors on their day are capable of beating any team, and I think their start to the season it's a big start to the season, but I think they can maybe pick up a result.
And also, I did mention before the play-in tournament as fighting for the eighth seed. So in the Western Conference, of course, it's more exciting than the East because there's only one team, the Wizards, who are fighting for the eighth spot. But I don't think they have a good chance to win that spot. But when you look at the Western Conference, there's five teams that can possibly overtake Memphis: Portland, New Orleans, Sacramento, San Antonio, and Phoenix. And also Memphis is the eighth seed, just to mention. Who do you think out of those six teams is going to end up being the eighth seed?
Can I just repeat them again quickly? Sorry.
So we got Memphis Grizzlies, Portland Trailblazers, the New Orleans Pelicans, Sacramento Kings, the San Antonio Spurs, and the Phoenix Suns.
Yeah, some of those lower teams I don't think really have a shot, like the Suns, Spurs, maybe the Kings. Pelicans, I think, could maybe catch up. They're only a few games behind, and they have the potential to win some games with like Zion Williamson, for example. Um, and the Trailblazers as well. Like a lot of these teams, when healthy and performing, they could overtake some of the teams ahead of them. Uh, I don't think The Pelicans are the 10 seed at the moment. I don't think anyone beyond them is gonna really have a shot. Although the Kings are the same number of games back, of course. But I think the Pelicans, I think, are the best team outside the playoff spot. So I have to take them. What about you?
I'm. I mean, yeah, like I think outside of Portland and New Orleans, I don't think there's anyone else that has a shot to like the other three teams. I don't think they have a shot to get that spot. I think I'm gonna go with the Trailblazers because they've had that experience. Last year they made the Western Conference Final, and I think they have some players coming back from the injured list. I think, and they still have Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum who can take them far. But yeah, I think that Portland has a shot to win to get the eighth seed.
Any other sort of final predictions or anything else you want to sort of add?
Well, I mean, just in general, I'm excited to be watching 6 games a day. Basically, it's going to be
Yeah,
amazing to just such a unique schedule and on a neutral site. It'll just be great in general to watch lots of games a day.
yeah, I agree. It's gonna be exciting. We're glad to have something back. And I know MLB's returned, the NHL's returning. Like a lot of the major leagues in North America are starting to make their comeback. So MLS has been back for a little while now. So it's good to get some sports back in North America.
For sure, definitely.
And I think that pretty much wraps up our sort of NBA rest of the season prediction video. Not sure how to describe it, but I think that pretty much wraps it up. Thank you for watching On The Sidelines. My name is Benedict Rhodes.
I'm Matthew Liam Bruni.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.